Hey, what's up, guys? It's Ryan from Green Beans Fishing. We're in the beginning of February here, and as you can see in the background, I'm starting to get some tackle ready for springtime. And I figured today I was going to put together a video for you guys on how I start to approach the spring, and just as far as tactics, tips, methods of targeting striped bass during that spring herring run when they're heading into the rivers and kind of spawning, and there's just tons and tons of bass everywhere. So yeah, today I'll be diving into kind of artificials I use, bait tactics I use, locations I look for, kind of trying to give you guys a top to bottom look at my approach to the spring. So hope you guys enjoy the video and stick around to learn some tips and tricks. So the first thing to talk about as far as targeting striped bass in the spring is definitely location. So around the first week in May here in Massachusetts is when the striped bass will start to show up on their yearly migration. These fish are typically coming up from the south from the Chesapeake Bay and the Hudson, and they're coming up through the canal and spawning in all of rivers and estuaries and inlets and little runoffs, where there's brackish water, because that's where a lot of the herring are running as well. And so those spawning bass are feeding on herring and going up into the rivers where it's protected and spawning the spawn bass. So during this time, a lot of lighter tackle is used. Kind of smaller fish are being targeted. A lot of schoolies that early season run. So typically, first 2 weeks of May, I'll be catching anywhere from 12-inch to maybe 26-inch striped bass in the rivers, and then from there there will start to be larger numbers of slot size and even larger fish. So for the most part, using lighter tackle, typically doing a lot of spin fishing, throwing artificials, things like that. Just anything that you can get in front of these schoolie bass, they'll pretty much hit in the spring. So as far as lure choice for the springtime, I typically go with a lot of smaller baits, throwing these with a lighter spinning rod that I'll show you guys in a minute here. But I wanted to just show you my arsenal of typical lures that I have with me when I'm targeting bass in those early, first 2 weeks of May, towards the end of May. And so as you can see, I love to keep kind of three types of lures on hand. The first being metals, second being soft plastics, and third being top water. So in the spring, it's great. There's so many fish around. It's a great time to try out different techniques. I haven't had as much luck on the top water as I'd like to, so that's one of my goals this year is to get more bass on the top water. But as far as you can't go wrong, my go-to lures that I'm going for are definitely the soft plastics and the metals. So what I keep on me for soft plastics, you can see here, this one here is from No Live Bait Needed. This is their 3-inch paddle tail, on, I believe this might be a 3/8 ounce jig head. This does really, really well. Small schoolies, I've had fish maybe 10 inches long bite this, and I've had fish 26 inches long bite this. So you really can't go wrong in that early springtime. Next, I always like to keep a couple of longer but micro sluggos. So again, these just have such a good action in the water. That tail is always whipping around, and just seems that if I'm having trouble and nothing else seems to be biting, then I'll throw one of these and can always get a reaction hit off of that. The third one that I like to keep on hand, and I always have a few of these in my box, is Hoagie makes a nice split tail soft plastic weighted, and this is a 1 ounce. I think they make these 3/4 ounce and half ounce as well. So I pretty much always have these three in my box for that springtime, as far as soft plastics. Then moving on to the metals. Um, always got to have a bucktail. I try and go no heavier than a 1 ounce bucktail, and I prefer a white, just standard white. This one's got a little bit of red on it, but pretty much can't go wrong with a white bucktail. I keep another one. Yeah, always got to have multiple in case you're losing lures or your leader snaps or you snag bottom or whatever the case. But I always like to keep extras on hand. But there's those white bucktails. Then a lure that I used as a freshwater bass lure for largemouth. But these little spoons I've had a lot of luck with in the rivers in the spring. It just spins in the water, and for some reason the bass love them. So I've had years where people all around me aren't catching. There's fly fishermen, there's other spin fishermen using rubber plastics and things like that, and nobody seems to be catching. And then I'll be throwing my little spoon here, and that'll be getting bass. So that's definitely a go-to that I have to have in my bag, and then just a longer silver version as well. So just a couple different sizes, couple different weights, and but similar action there. So that's and then also small Castmasters as well. Gotta have a small Castmaster in the bag in the tackle box. Pretty much lure as good as it's been around as old as time, and pretty much can't go wrong with a Castmaster. So lastly, what I talked about for my lure types that I keep on hand in the spring are the topwater. So I've got a few of these in my bag, but these are the Hoagie. I think these are a 3-inch popper. As you can hear, it's weighted, it rattles. In these backwater estuaries and rivers and inlets where these bass are kind of hanging out, you are going to want to look for topwater plugs that got a rattle in them. I found that little extra does make all the difference. So my second lure that I keep on me is also, I think this is a 3.5 or 5-inch spook, just a little dog walker. Also got a rattle in it and weighted. So these are two lures that I can pretty much sling anywhere, exactly where I want it, up into little runoffs where bass are corralling herring. Can pretty much get anywhere as I'm traveling through the river with any of these lures. So I really like the versatility of what I keep in this box, and pretty much everything is user friendly, easy. Bass love attacking all of these lures. I mean, in that springtime, you really can't go wrong with anything that I've got seated here at the desk. So that's a look into the tackle, and next I'm going to go into the rod and reel that I use for my springtime bass fishing. Alright guys, so as far as spinning rods that I use in the spring, like I said, I like to run a little bit of a lighter setup. So this is my typical schoolie rod. This is a Penn Pursuit 4. It's a 2500 class reel on a medium light 7-foot fast 8 to 15 pound rod. So this rod's got great action to it. It's very light, good drag system on the reel. I mean, pretty much any light rod like this, 2500 to kind of 3,000 size reel is good for this these schoolie bass in the early spring. Anything kind of over that, the 4,000s, 5,000s, 6,000s, you're getting into the bigger bass gear. And yeah, I don't like to go much heavier than 4,000 size reel typically. So this is my go-to setup. What I run 15 pound or 20 pound braid. This is just Power Pro, pretty standard stuff. And then I'll run a 15 pound fluoro leader that's probably between 3 and 4 feet long. And I pretty much just tie the braid straight to the fluoro there. And I've got a speed clip to switch out baits, because as you can see, I have a nice little arsenal of lures there that I like to use. But all in all, I mean, this is definitely my go-to springtime schoolie bass rod. Um, so that's my go-to. And then the other rod that I like to keep on hand is a slightly larger. Um, this is this is I believe it's a Penn. Was this Penn Fierce 4? And this is a bait runner. So it's got that bait run feature, which I'll get into later when I talk about bait fishing the river. But same thing, I run 20-pound Power Pro on this. Again, I run this speed clip with 15 to 25-pound fluoro on this rod. If I see that there are bigger fish mixed in, then I'll switch over to this rod and start using this one. But you can pretty much get away with all the same line class and everything as that other rod, just a little bit more with this. So this is a 7-foot medium power fast action spinning rod rated for 8 to 17-pound line. So just a little bit heavier of a rod, but super lightweight, easy. You can cast this all day long. Same thing with the other rod. I mean, when I go out there and I'm fishing the rivers and doing this kind of fishing, I'm usually by myself, and I just like to have a nice light rod that I can toss around, and as I'm navigating the boat and traveling through the river, usually drifting through the river, I can get a few quick casts in and then put the rod to the side. It's not too heavy, too bulky, anything like that. I like to have small gear on the green beans when I'm fishing. So those are my two spinning setups that I use when I'm springtime fishing for bass in the rivers. So next I'm going to be talking about bait fishing and the tackle that I use, the rods that I use. As you can see behind me, I've got some more rods over there, so we'll get ready to dive into that now. All right, guys, so the first major distinction between when I'm fishing with the artificials and lures with the spinning rods versus when I switch over and I'm bait fishing with cut bait or live bait, the biggest difference is I'll always anchor up, or I always want the boat to be fixed while I'm bait fishing. I'm constantly working, I'm cutting bait, I'm resetting the rods, I'm adjusting the weight needed on the line and things like that. I'm always doing something, so it just one less thing I need to worry about is the boat moving around and drifting with the current and other oncoming boat traffic and things like that. So I'm always doing this from an anchored position. Now, what I like to do for this is I'll pick a spot where there's either kind of like a bend in the river or somewhere I think there might be a deep hole. A lot of times those bends in the river, because the current will be rushing through there, it'll tend to kick up and dig up these holes, and those holes are good spots for bass to hang out and ambush bait going by. So I try and find a spot where I think they're going to be bass holding. And then I'll set my anchor just outside the channel, so I might be in 5 to 7 feet of water, and then just where I want my baits to be are going to be on the edge of 15 feet of water. So it's right in a river channel. You want to be I typically try and spread my baits out to get a few different depths covered, because you don't really know where these bass are, and a lot of times they might just move through. A school of fish might move through, and I want to make sure that I've got all areas of the river covered. So anchoring up, finding a good spot, and then getting right into it. Once I anchor up and find a good spot, I immediately want to start cutting some bait and chumming. Chumming is going to be a big part of this. It's going to be able to get the fish to find where your boat is, and also if you do it right, you can get fish to hang out by your boat for extended periods of time. So I've had an hour or 2 hour stretch where I'm chumming pretty heavy and I'm pretty much catching fish the entire time. So if done correctly and chumming correctly, you can keep those fish around pretty much any point in the tide, which is nice, and it makes for great fishing. I mean, this whole springtime makes for great fishing because of the pure amount of fish that are in the river at this time. So that's a really great bonus to this. Now, as far as rigs that I'm using here when I'm bait fishing, because I'm fixed, anchored, staying still, and we're using just chunks of mackerel or herring or whatever bait fish I can get at the time. We're going to be using circle hooks with fluoro leaders and barrel swivels as our main rig. So what I do is I'll get usually around an 8/0 circle. This is an inline octopus circle. I think this is a Gamakatsu, but just a solid circle, and typically I'll use 25-pound fluorocarbon for my leader line here, but all I've got on hand is 15 and 40. Depending on the situation, you can pretty much vary anywhere from 15 to 40 with your leader line. For the river in the spring, I'll go 15 or 20 to 25 is pretty much the heaviest I'll go. But then, later in the summer when the bigger bass come in and they move out to the rock piles and things like that, you're going to want a little bit of a heavier leaders, because your leader line might be banging up in the rocks, and fish grabs your bait, he's going to swim down into the rocks and things like that. So 15-pound fluoro, we got our anywhere between like a 5 and an 8/0 circle, and I'll run about 3 to 4 feet, typically like 3 feet, 3.5 of that fluorocarbon, and then I put a barrel swivel on the end there. So the barrel swivel is going to be imperative, because when you're casting out these chunks in the river, and I'll cast up stream of my boat, and the chunk is going to drop down, and it's going to float down the river back towards, as you've been chumming, there's going to be fish hanging out behind the boat where that chum has been going. And as you cast and you get your bait out there, if you're not getting anything within the first 5-10 minutes, you're going to want to reel that bait back in and recast it. And when you're reeling a chunk of mackerel, it's going to spin in the water, so it's really imperative that you've got a barrel swivel. And I actually attach this rig to an existing barrel swivel on my rods, with a snap swivel on my rod with a barrel swivel. So you got to make sure that you've got some sort of swivel in your line, so your line's not getting all twisted up. So that's one important thing. Other than that, this is a pretty typical rig. Again, just a couple other hooks, just a couple different hooks here, different size barrel. I was experimenting with these micro barrels versus the normal. I think this is like an 80-pound Spro barrel or something. And I think this is a micro. I'm not sure exactly what the strength on this one is, but I didn't notice too much of a difference in the performance. I actually prefer a little bit bigger of a barrel swivel, because I do like a little bit of weight on my chunk. I like the chunk to get down, because the current of the river's moving pretty quickly. But I like to avoid adding weight to my rig if I can. You want that chunk to float as natural as possible, have as natural as possible of a presentation in the water. So sometimes I find just that heavier barrel swivel is really all you need, instead of putting on a couple of split shots or something like that. So that's pretty much all there is to the rig, and now I'm just going to show you guys a couple of the rods that I use when I'm doing this type of fishing. Alright guys, so as far as rods and reels that I use when I'm doing this bait fishing, I like to look for or use something that has a bait runner feature, or like bait casters, anything that can go into some sort of free spool, as well as having a clicker. And I think those two features are pretty very key to this type of fishing. So the first rod that I'll show you is the one that I actually had earlier. It's that Penn Fierce bait runner. And so this bait run feature, it allows for you to set 2 drags essentially. So I can have one drag where the line comes out very easily, and that's when my bait is running. When the fish picks up the chunk, you want to have a pretty light drag on, so he doesn't really know that he's hooked. So I have that bait runner on, and then after a couple seconds, I'll give a couple turns, and it'll engage the next drag, which is a bit tougher drag. So I have my bait runner drag for when the chunk is out there and the fish picks it up, and then I give a reel or two, and it'll tighten up the drag for me, and engage the fight drag. So that feature, I really love that feature, and I enjoyed using this reel this past summer, doing this bait fishing. So that's the first setup that I'm using. Again, you can see I've got my rig on there. I've got a barrel swivel on the rod, as well as my barrel swivel on the rig. So when I'm casting and reeling in this chunk over and over, I'm not getting any spin in my nice Power Pro braid. So that's my first setup. The next two setups are pretty similar to each other. I use a Baitcaster reel. So this one is an Abu Garcia Ambassador, and what I really like about this reel is it's got the free spool. It's got the free spool here, for as all bait casters do, and it's also got a clicker. You can hear the clickers on, and what I like about that is when it's in free spool, the clicker doesn't let you get backlash. So kind of similar to that bait runner reel, when I have my bait set out and I cast my chunk out, I put the reel in free spool and I allow the bass to take the chunk. And when he takes the chunk, there's little resistance, and as he's running with it, when I feel he's had it for a couple seconds, I reel, engage my drag, and then I have my fight drag set. So it's tougher, so that'll really set the hook in there. So I run two of these setups. One, again, with the Abu Garcia Ambassador on, I think this is a 7-foot medium heavy, 10 to 20 pound rod. So it's actually made, this is Abu Garcia's Ambassador rod as well. So I really like this rod reel combo. And again, just like those other rods, I run braid to fluorocarbon leader, which is about 3 to 4 feet long, and then my snap swivel there. And this one doesn't have a barrel swivel on it, but I'm gonna make a change before the season starts. I'll put a barrel swivel on there. Make sure, again, can't stress enough, you want to get all the twist out of your line when you're reeling in those chunks again. So that's my second rod. Similar to that Abu Garcia bait caster, but this one's a Shimano Calcutta bait caster. It's got all the same features. It's got your free spool. It's got a clicker on it, so I can put it in free spool, let the fish take it. I'll know when the fish is taking it, and then do a reel to engage my fight drag. And this is kind of the heaviest duty, I guess, bait setup I keep on board. So this is a 7-foot, 15 to 30 pound rod, and again, this is the Calcutta 400B bait caster. So those are my three setups. One difference I wanted to show you about this rig, again, I have the normal fluorocarbon leader on there, and I had mentioned earlier about different weights needed for the river. And so what I have on the end of my fluorocarbon leader here, I've got my snap swivel to attach my hook rig to, and I've also got a little dropper loop here to attach different size weights. Right now I've got a 1 ounce weight on here, and I'll go as light as like a 1/2 ounce or a 1/4 ounce weight, and I'll vary this depending on what the tide is at the time. So if the river's really, really flowing and rushing, I'm going to have this 1 ounce weight on there, and then once it gets closer to slack tide, I'm going to just take that weight off and just run the straight leader lines. So totally adjustable. That's just one kind of thing I noticed, and I picked up this tactic as I was fishing this past season. I was having to reset my baits constantly. I wasn't catching as many fish as having the baits pinned down and kind of just moving along slowly. I figured my theory was if you put a light enough weight on there, it'll bring the bait down to the bottom where all your chum's been going down, but the current will still bounce it along the bottom. So a bass kind of scavenging the bottom looking for crabs or whatever will see that chunk there and still pick it up. It won't be it's not too much of a unnatural presentation where if you had just the bait pinned there with a weight, So I try and go as light as possible. One ounce is the heaviest weight that I'll typically use for this type of fishing. But that's one kind of additional tip or trick I guess I learned over this past season, just fishing the river so much. All right, guys. So now having covered off all of the kind of artificial and lure fishing that I do in the river in the early spring, as well as all of the bait fishing, cut bait fishing that I do in the spring. The next thing that I've kind of forgot to mention was I do a bit of trolling as well. And typically I'll employ trolling to try to figure out where the fish are, where they're holding. If I'm fishing kind of different stretches of the river that I don't typically target, and I don't know quite where the honey holes are, I'll do some trolling to try and figure out where the fish are. And you'll find that a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, certain bends or certain holes in the river where you might see a spike in the depth, that's typically where you might start getting some hits. And that's where once I start to catch some fish, that's when you'll set up and either start doing some chunk fishing or pop it in neutral and cast some of the lighter stuff on the spinning rods, and things like that. So trolling, also a very good tactic. One major rig that I always have on board any time of year is a Niner lure. Umbrella rig, Alabama rig, Niner lure, kind of has different names, but basically I don't have one on me, but it's just an umbrella with 6 arms. Each one has a 6-inch rigged shad with a hook in it, and then there's a stinger bait down the middle, and it's a weighted umbrella, so it's got maybe like 3 ounces of weight on it, and so I'll troll that around. One thing that I do add on to that umbrella rig is I'll add an additional trolling weight. The size of the weight may vary depending on what the tide is doing in the river. So I'll either have a 3-ounce weight on or up to like an 8-ounce weight on there, and just a inline. It's got a barrel swivel at the front, the weight, and then a snap swivel on the back, and you just clip the rig to the snap swivel and clip your main line to the front of the weight, and then you've got an additional 3 to 8 ounces of weight dragging that umbrella down. So I found it's good to drag the rig down a little bit. You can fish a little bit quicker speed. You can cover more ground. I've found a lot of times the faster speed attracts more bites. I don't know if it's because the shad, the paddle tails on the shad are moving more, frantically or what, but definitely the higher speed and being able to also just get that rig down low at that higher speed. That's two things that I've kind of noticed with the added weight on the umbrella rig. So really good tactic, really produceful, and just a overall great way to go and find fish if you're fishing a new area. So another rig that I'll always keep on board is now this is a Daddy Mac lure, and it's a split back lure. It's got great action in the water. I've fished these at couple different colors, and a couple things about the rig that I use for this. One, I'll add a leader to it, so I'll add like anywhere from probably like 50 to 80 pound leader. Typically I'll use this 80 pound, what is this, Andy, I think? Yeah, Andy leader line. That's pretty good. So I'll go 80 pound, and I'll tie about a 3-foot leader to the Daddy Mac, and then that goes to a barrel swivel. I like to go large with my barrel swivel when I'm trolling because it's so far in front of the rig, and just don't like to get any sort of twist or anything in my line as I'm retrieving and things like that or setting it. So go with a pretty big barrel. And then the last part here is kind of a homemade version of that trolling weight that I was talking about with the umbrella rig. But typically, what I should have is a couple beads in here just to protect my knots. But again, just that 80-pound fluoro to another barrel swivel, and then I've got, I think this is a 6-ounce weight, or maybe a 4 to 6 ounce weight. Just an egg weight inline that I'll troll with this Daddy Mac. So that's another pretty good trolling technique that I've used over the years. Just around this time, again, I'll throw these things out just to while I'm going from spot to spot, or if I'm looking for fish or anything like that. You know, it's better to have something in the water than not. And a lot of times, the river that I'm fishing, there's a lot of no wake zones, so you can pretty much troll at any point in the river. So that's another rig that I like to just have on hand. And then another rig that I built last year and kind of was researching towards the end of the year is a Mojo rig. Now they use these down south, and a tandem Mojo rig, basically the idea is you troll two heavy bucktails. Typically a tandem Mojo will have like a 16-ounce and an 8-ounce, or like a 12-ounce and a 6-ounce, or something like that. I think I've got a 10-ounce and maybe like a 3-ounce or something like that. And the way that the tandem Mojo rig works is you're supposed to have a 3-way swivel up at the top. And so I've got to remake this rig with a 3-way swivel, but you have a 3-way swivel, and then you've got about 4 feet of line going to your heavier bucktail. So about 4 feet of line, leader line, going to your heavier bucktail. And then you've got about double the distance, so maybe like 8 feet of line going to your lighter bucktail. Now, I've rigged typically you'll see these Mojos with, they've got some sort of paddle tail rubber on them. So that's kind of the idea that I went with for mine. And you'll notice that when you're trolling this, the heavier bucktail gets weighted down, and the lighter bucktail kind of flutters up a little higher, and you're able to troll this at a pretty high speed. And the two of these together kind of, they've got good action, and they troll together pretty nicely. So that's one rig that I started messing around with this past year, and I want to dial in a little bit better. And I've seen some guys put bunker spoons on the back end. So I've got this small spoon, and then I've got a bigger one as well somewhere, but I don't have it here. But I kind of want to try and experiment with one of these Mojos with a spoon on the end of it. I think that could produce some good action with the bunker spoon. So those are kind of my main trolling techniques for the spring, and it's a lot of paddle tail action with the Niner, with these Mojos. Just basically anything I can get down with some weight in the river, which has, you know, fast current moving. Anything that I can get down there and present to the fish while I'm traveling from spot to spot is ideal. So that's about it for my trolling techniques. So as far as trolling rods that I keep on board, the first rod that I have to have on board is to troll the Niner lure, because like I said, the Niner is pretty much the ultimate trolling lure. It looks like a school of baitfish, so you're never gonna miss any bass going by. But because you're pulling so much weight and you've got so much drag under there, you do need a pretty stout trolling rod. So I've got this. I'm pretty sure it's a 7-foot rod. It's a custom rod, but very stout. It's got a roller eye on the tip there, which I like. I like the roller guides for trolling, especially for my Niner rod. And then paired with a Penn Senator, Penn Senator 113. So great size reel, good drag. It's got enough power, and just all around, this is my ideal setup for trolling heavier rigs like those umbrella rigs with the added trolling weight. So that's And as far as line on this, I've got probably about 30 feet, maybe 30 to 50 feet of, I want to say this is 50-pound fluorocarbon leader. So I run that to a heavy snap swivel, tie that. I use a FG knot to tie the leader line to the main braid, which is I think 60-pound Power Pro. So I run 60-pound Power Pro, 50 to 60-pound fluoro, and then just a heavy snap swivel, and that goes right to my trolling weight and then to the rig. And then my second trolling rod that I keep on board, it's not necessarily specifically trolling, but this is just kind of use this for live bait fishing, like live mackerel, things like that. It's just a nice bass rod. Got a TLD 15 on there, and this is loaded up with a 30-pound high vis mono with, I want to say, probably either 30-pound Power Pro on this as well. So 30-pound Power Pro, then I got maybe like 100 yards of 30-pound high vis mono. And then since I'm running this as kind of a live bait or trolling rod, I'll just tie that mono directly to my snap swivel there. And then similar to the rest of my trolling rigs, this is just another one of my rigs. It's just kind of 2 feet of maybe 50-pound fluoro or something, going to my lure here, which is a bucktail with a I want to say like a 9-inch sluggo on there. So pretty typical. This is, again, anything lighter than I'm throwing out. So this I would troll on this rod. The Daddy Mac, it's only got about a 4-ounce trolling weight or something, a 3 or 4-ounce trolling weight. So I'll troll that with this rod as well. And then as well as that Tandem Mojo, I'll troll that with this rod as well. Anything heavier than that, once you get up to, they make Mojo rigs like 16 and 8 ounce. Like if I was trolling something heavier like that, I'd probably throw it on the Niner rod that I had just showed you. But for the most part, for most single trolling rigs and things like that, you can get away with this rod. And again, that's the TLD 15 lever drag reel. Really love this for bass fishing. And I have it paired with a Tsunami 6'6" boat rod, rated for 20 to 40-pound line, medium heavy action. So it's stout enough, but it's also, you get enough action with the flexible tip. You get enough action here where you, if I'm trolling any like lipped plugs or things like that on board in the fall for like bluefish or striped bass, you know, the rod offers plenty of action on things like that. So overall, really good setup. I'm really happy with this setup for most of my trolling applications, and then the other rod there for my Niner applications. So that's pretty much top to bottom my trolling setups, as well for striped bass. So all in all, trolling to try and find the fish and fish new locations. If I know there's fish around, I'll pop it in neutral, pop the green beans in neutral, and just do some spin fishing, casting those small rubber, plastics, and small metals. And then if I'm got a few hours to kill and can get to a spot on time, get to a nice spot, set up, fish a good tide, then that's when I'm gearing up all my bait stuff. Typically I'll get a flat of herring, chum that up, use chunks of herring and chunks of mackerel for cut baits when I'm bait fishing. So all in all, that's pretty much my approach to the spring. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something new, and feel free to drop some comments with questions, or share other techniques that you guys use bass fishing when the spring comes around and the spawning fish are here. So yeah, let me know what you thought, and thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment below any of your favorite moments, additional tips or tricks that you personally employ, or fishing stories that you enjoy. And as always, tight lines.